How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Welcome to the Museum of Graffiti Artist Talk Live.
Thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so I'm gonna quickly just welcome everybody to the Museum of Graffiti, uh, our daily
What
art,
up, Curly?
our daily art talk, where we get to connect and build with artists who have shaped this culture, this writing culture that we celebrate. And today we are featuring Wayne, COD. Infamous writer, advocate for the art, ambassador, fine art painter, and accomplished commercial artist as well. I am Carlos Mayer, aka Mayor 139, and so I want to. There
Yo,
you go.
yo, this,
Welcome
thank
back.
you, man. Yo, it's disconnected by itself.
Okay, so what I was asking, let's start kind of from the beginning because you were born in London,
That's
and
correct.
you came to the U.S. when you were 7 years old. When did you interested or involved with graffiti writing?
Yo, when I first came, I noticed it right away. We lived in the North Bronx, or some people say the Northwest Bronx, which is a neighborhood called Alton Avenue, and up there in the Bronx, all the trains ride above ground. It's elevated, so it was easy for me to notice um, all the whole cars and everything. It was just right there in your face.
And what were you know what was your appeal? What drew you to it?
That what drew me to it first was the color. The color was just like, just I couldn't understand it. I just had to keep looking at it. And I think like after, so I was watching it from right away, 77 or whatever, and then like some years later, early 80s, I think my brother was like, oh, like I said to him one day, we were walking. Oh, I wish it would stop, because we were too young to we wasn't really traveling on the train, riding the train, unless we were with my mom at that time. So, I used to look at it from down the street on a block called Olinville or Bronx Park.
Did you have any artistic inclinations when you were a kid?
Yeah, yeah, I was drawing already, just cartoons and stuff, Saturday morning cartoons, just kind of like doodling around, playing with it. Yeah.
And what was your first writing? Who introduced you to writing, and who were your earliest partners?
Who introduced me to writing is a group of young guys around the way. The crew is called CSB, Can't Stop Bombing. So and the real crew, it was like a neighborhood crew of people in my building, and my man Sabar is one of the original members of that crew, because we go that far back, and these guys, they did a lot of motion bombing first. I wasn't going with them at first. Motion bombing, I went with them a few times, and then what happened is they started going to like Dye Avenue. If people know Dye Avenue in the Bronx, they would go to Dye Avenue, and they would hit that layup up, and
To, to me, it
shortly
seemed that
after
you
that.
you you had a focus on style writing early on, and so I want us to go through some of the quick slides of your early style writing. And you mentioned that this was an important piece for you.
Yeah, this was an important piece because I had started really coming strong. I believe this might have been '86, and I was painting on this car with Diro, one of my mentors, and Diro. We were painting this car between 225th and 233rd in the Bronx, in the North Bronx on the two line. For those that don't know, and what happened, we were painting at night in the middle of track, and then all of a sudden, like Diro had been finished already, and I was outlining my piece, and then like we saw somebody coming from 233rd, looked like a beat cop. We seen him way down. We could see his shadow. We thought he saw us, and then Dira was like, "Yo, let me get the white. You keep outlining, and I'll throw on the highlight for you." It was like the only time he ever really touched my piece. But if you ever notice Diro, he's like a perfectionist. So he's like the white highlights are always really next to the outline perfectly. And then the cop came down on the tracks, and he was coming towards us, and then we skated, we bounced. So that car's unfinished. I mean, my piece is unfinished, but Diro's piece is finished. So,
When
but
you
but
were
still
when you
one
were
of my
painting
favorite cars.
trains, were you often chased or arrested at all?
Oh yeah, man, we were chased a lot. I didn't really, you know, I got arrested a couple times, a few times, you know, it's part of the game. You know what I mean? You know,
How did your parents feel about this?
oh, oh, my mom, she's still talking about it till this day. Still, damn, I can't believe you're still doing this shit. You know what I mean? So, you know, it's, you know, if you love something, you just keep doing it. And that was a top to bottom. Again, I think I did that with Dero, top to bottom. One of the few top to bottoms he did. We did that in Harlem tunnels in the winter.
So one of the things that I've always admired about you is the scale of painting. You are often doing very big pieces, style pieces. Even your throw up seems big in terms of the impression on the train. Why did scale matter so much to you?
Yeah, because scale matters. Because, you know, I mean, in the beginning, to me, you know, graffiti writers, you know, they're the ones that really took a lot of took the art form to scale, in my opinion. You know, when you looked at the train, when I first looked at trains, way before I even painted trains, and you saw the scale, you know, of a whole car, it was just like it just really hit you in your face. You had to look at it. You know what I mean? It's like, here I am. So like, if you on the street like 4 or 5 blocks down, and the train's riding above the L's, you could see that thing from miles away, man. So if it's a whole car, and if it's done right, you know, so that's what motivated me to always do things big. I'm not really a guy that could paint small. There was an era where people were doing productions and painting small. I didn't do so good in that era.
Who was influencing you in terms of your development of style over the years? What kind of influences were you taking in?
So in the very beginning, I got to give a lot of props to, like I said, you know, in the early days, just watching trains, you know, like guys like Blade and Min and um, you know, Rolio. Those are some of the first names that I consistently kept seeing. Spin, early spin pieces. They were kind of simple but style, and you could notice them. And also seeing TC5, you know, and then when I started actually painting, where I got a lot of inspiration from was with people I painted with. You know, like Dero. Another one of my mentors is Michelob. Michelob is the founder of COD. So
What does COD stand for?
originally it was called children on children on dust, because a lot of those guys, you know, they get high and they smoke dust. When I kind of inherited the crew, I changed it to children of destruction, because, you know, I don't get high at all, never did.
So another thing that I wanted to ask you about that period, because you started writing towards the middle end of the train era.
Well, they noticed me in the middle, but I started in '83. You know, I started painting in around the Alton neighborhood in '83. I was painting on Olinville block, and then I was doing stuff over at my elementary school, which is 96. 96 PS 96 was a really also just filled with graffiti by guys, you know, a crew called TCB, Total Control Bombers, and guys like Sash and Siege
Yeah,
and Tap, and a lot of those guys from up in those blocks. Also
right. And
SOD crew. You know, these guys Ross and them. They were like really old school guys that had been painting from a lot longer, and also Rolio. So
right. And so
yeah,
so what I was trying to get at is that you and your crew really smashed hard on
that
the
Master
white
Color.
trains towards the end of the era, right?
No, and towards the end of the era, we dominated.
Yes.
Yeah, you know, when that first came out, what was dominating was Tat's crew. You know, BG, Bio, Nicer, Ken, Shame, all those guys, T-Kit, you know, one of my favorites. Those guys was dominating. They nothing but whole cars and productions on the line, especially on my line, the twos and fives, where I lived. You know, before I went to other lines, I just focused on the twos and fives.
Yeah, you guys were going hard and Senzo was going hard. How did it feel that,
Yeah, exactly.
you there was a certain end, a certain death of graffiti on the trains that was impending, right? Um, were you just like, all right, let's get in our last licks and go hard?
Yeah, I mean, no, for us, it wasn't really that. Like, we noticed them bouncing people from line to line. They started off, I believe, on the 4 line, and then they started on the 6 line. But we were painting on the twos and fives, and we got a chance to hit the six, but we didn't get any photos, and it was a lot hotter over there. And then we went to the one line. So we started on twos and fives, and then we went to the one line with FC crew, in 85, 86. And we crushed
Who
them.
was the FC crew?
FC crew, West FC, Zaire, Zame, Surge, Serve, all those guys at that particular time was killing it. They were running the one tunnel, which they had taken over from Flight. Flight TDS was running it, which with ball busters, and then we came, and then we I learned from them a lot. Painting in the one tunnel, you see like West doing whole cars, along with like K's. We brought back K's FBA, and then
Yeah.
you see John 156 crew, Kyle, and the yard. That was one of the only places you'd see like maybe 20 people in the yard at a time. So you can stand there and watch. There's times when I just stood back and watched them paint, where I learned a lot of techniques and learned how they, the confidence of how to paint from watching
Well,
guys. West.
moving on, the truth is that you learned a lot of techniques, and I want to talk about what happens after the trains. And I love this because it's not an actual train, folks. This is a train layup at the Tats Crew
That's
location, right?
correct. Yeah, this is a replica of a train that they originally did for the Echo video game, and then they decided to keep the train, and then
Right. This is a Metal Man Ed train. Yes.
that's correct. That's correct. I believe he's the only one that makes them. I mean, they look real. Good
So
job.
so this is really the segue into what
What up,
happens
this way?
with your style, really, because one of the things that starts happening is your development of style gets really good after the trains. You definitely were hitting the Wall of Fame for many years. This is a piece from what year was this at the Hall of Fame?
No, this piece here is 2018, and actually the Hall of Fame. No, to paint at the Hall of Fame, you had to be known on the subways. It took like 22 years before I was even, allowed to be painted at the Hall of Fame. I mean, they didn't, they asked me to paint there, you know what I mean? But like originally, like you had to really kill shit on the line. Only the best dudes painted at the Hall of Fame, and you go to the Hall of Fame and you see like part pieces and cool and, Panic and Scheme, and then you'd be like, wow. And of course, Stingray and Vulcan, guys like that.
One of the
But that,
things that
that was a piece at the Hall of Fame some years ago with my boy Nero.
this piece I like a lot. One of the things that I noticed in your years of development was how lush your colors were getting. You were focusing a lot on colors as well as style. Tell us about this evolution, after the fact. I mean, you started refining your style a lot on the walls, but not just in style and in painting, in color painting.
Yeah, no, I always felt like color was my strong point, but like as the decades flew by, what happened is just by painting with so many different writers and so many different crews, like I said, I'm down with FC, and FBA and TC5, so I learned a lot from those guys. But really painting with my partner Dero and Wen mostly, but we did cars with a few of those guys. And then like I also painted with guys, the AOK crew, painted a lot with Reese and my boy Ghost from Risk Crew. So like I always was like, oh, you could mix the styles. Back then, a lot of people wouldn't really mix a mechanical style with a curved style. They'd be all mechanical or they'd be all curved. You know what I mean? So there were certain guidelines and ethics that people they would just stay to it. And I was already like unorthodox, so I'd break those rules a little bit, and play around with it, and then eventually, it became to look right. It just started looking right, you know what I mean? And then traveling in Europe was a big thing, a big inspiration, because their approach to style, they were kind of behind in certain places in the early days. When I went there in the '90s, not everybody had style.
Where were the first countries you were visiting?
The first place I went to Munich, Germany, and we did it. There was a big jam there, uh, called the MC Fresh Jam. I believe it was in Frankfurt. I think it was in Mines, but that jam, I met a lot of guys: Bates, Save, CMP, Nug from Sweden, Gold. So a lot of guys showed me their work, and they had their own original style. Bates and guys like Save had things that kind of resembled a New York style, but doing their own thing. Um, but they were painting, just to see what they were doing. Also, was like very inspiring because it was different from New York. They love to work. They work together, stronger than even though in New York, with this cruise and this amazing production from the pioneering days to the present.
Do you feel European writers had an advantage because it was early on much more accepted because of the culture of art in Europe?
Well, I don't know. That's a yes and a no because it wasn't accepted on the trains. And my guys painting trains in Europe, they don't really care about walls. You know what I mean? And then there was most cities had a designated spot where it's these days we call it a free spot. But if you went to a city in the '90s, people would say, "Oh, go to the Hall of Fame." But it wasn't like a Hall of Fame like the One Park and Six. Like anybody could go there and do a piece. So for some writers coming up that may have never painted subways out there or whatever, that could be an advantage because you can go and practice. Whereas like in New York and places like LA and a lot of other places in the States, back in the '80s and '90s, you're not painting a wall unless it's illegal. That's a fact. You know what I mean? In the '90s, we painted a lot of what we call gray area walls, where we pretended to have uh, permission. You know what I mean? And a lot of that started with when, just kind of like guerrillaing, like grassroots, just like, what, I don't care, like the trains we had been clean from '89, and we had still been, like Van and Reese and Ghost was hitting clean trains, and we'd go sometimes and hit clean trains, but they wasn't running. So we still wanted to get visibility.
Right,
So we started hitting in our neighborhood first, where we were comfortable on that block. And,
right.
we did it in the daytime. And we noticed that the police, they saw you do it in the day and they thought you had permission too. So then, we do the next block and the
Hey,
next
but let me
block and
ask
the
you
next
something.
block.
In Europe, in terms of legality, did you ever get arrested there for graffiti or?
No, no, we got chased a lot. We got chased a lot in Europe. I say, one thing about European riders or train riders in Europe is they're very thorough. These guys will spend 6 hours in the bushes for weeks on end. So they know the schedules, they know when the guards are coming, and they know, oh, you got 20 minutes, you got 40 minutes to paint a car. So if there's times you get chased, but we never got caught. Sometimes we got stopped going into a yard, and the European police was very polite, I must say. They were like, "What are you doing here? What's your name? Do you have ID?" And if you didn't have, if you didn't get caught on the yard, they'd just be like, "Okay, you got to get out of here." At least
Yeah.
that's from my experiences of being stopped near a yard in Europe in the '90s. But yeah, we
So
been chased a million times.
yeah. So Wayne, I want to take a pause and welcome everybody who's just joining us. We are the Museum of Graffiti, and we're having our IG live talks with artist Wayne One COD.
Thank you
And
for everybody checking in.
yeah,
What
yeah,
up,
and
Bates?
yeah, we got some good people. I see you, Diro. So I want to I
Oh,
want to
that's my
shift gears
mentor
and go
right there,
back to the
Dero.
painting, right? To you're painting top to bottoms, and now you do a lot of these murals. You're doing top to bottom buildings and like full on wild styles.
Well, I mean, they're style pieces. I don't know if they're like wild styles, but like, they're like what I've learned from some writers. Like what I liked about painting with Dero is like you have a lot of style in the piece, but you can still really see the detail in the letters. And it took years to learn that. In the beginning, I didn't really know that as much, but as time went on, and we tried so many different styles, and even in the '90s, I'd paint walls with Reese, and we got real wacky and going different directions because we wanted to do different things. And then I feel like every 10 years you got to look back at the foundation. You got to look back at the true essence of letter foundation. So we look back to what really was true and realize we have to come back to that, you know, and hey, and by that time, your technique is better, the way you're thinking is more experienced.
Right.
Um,
I in this one particular piece that you painted, there's something that stood out to me that was a precursor to what was to come from you, particularly in the S right here, this area, this absence of space, this subtraction uh, of style, part of your style, which comes in later, which is quite interesting. This was a nice, a beautiful piece, and
Thank you.
I want to segue into this next part for the sake of time. Into you're not just painting graffiti murals; you start doing commercial work.
That's correct. We were asked to do it. We didn't really plan to make money off of painting graffiti, but at times people would ask us to paint a little gate or a little shop, and then it kind of built into something. Here's a wall. It's a chain of stores in Central America and Panama, and around 2008, 2009. Chet contracted a few jobs, and we went down. This one particularly, is me and Doc. He sketched the Brooklyn, and I did the Biggie. And basically, every store they wanted a picture or a portrait of Biggie, and they wanted letters that represented, Brooklyn or New York.
For people that don't know, you have always been an enterprising artist, and not just with graffiti on walls and things like that. You were painting at Unique Boutique for some time. You got into the fashion game early on in your career.
That's correct. What up, Doc? Yeah, no. I mean, you know what? A lot of that stuff was really organic. None of that stuff was planned. I mean, when I first, started writing around the way in '84 and stuff, I saw Spank TC5, and he was like in the newspaper for airbrushing T-shirts, and then I went on a family trip to Virginia, and I seen some guys painting palm trees down at Virginia Beach, and I was like, oh, I mean, damn, this thing looked like spray paint. I got to get one. I got one and tried it, and I was terrible at it, and then I was like, damn, can't really get that. I saw Dira around the block, and I said, yo, got this thing upstairs, man. It's just crazy. It's great, but I can't really figure it out. He comes up, and right away he does a shirt. It was dope. And then I was like, that motivated me to keep painting. But we threw the airbrush down for a while, and we painted more trains. And then it wasn't until like '89 where I really started taking the airbrush stuff serious around the way, and got a lot of kids wanted shirts. And then
Right, but it
it
wasn't
domino affected. The domino
right.
effect.
But it was just kind of a means to an end, right? To make some money. It wasn't necessarily an interest in fashion.
No, no, no. It wasn't even to make money. We just loved the idea that like we could do a shirt and it looked like graffiti. You could wear your own shit. You know what I mean? And then people would just ask you, "Yo, how much you charging for that?" And we're like, "Oh, you want to pay?" So originally we're charging 10, $15, and before you know it, we're charging hundreds of dollars, and then that led from there to like places like the Mart, and places in Harlem with this guy Big Ed, and I even worked a little bit with Shirt Kings, and then eventually I got the gig at Unique Boutique. Some guy in the art store in Pearl Paint was like, he saw a shirt I did when I walked. Every week I'd go to Pearl Paint to get supplies, and he saw the shirt. He said, "Hey, they're looking for people at Unique." I didn't know what Unique was, so he gave me the address, and I went down there, and which wasn't too far from Pearl Paint. Pearl Paint was on Canal Street, and Unique Boutique was on Astor Place. So I walked up there with a little photo album of T-shirts. Long story short, I go in, speak to the manager at the time, and he goes, "Oh, well, come behind the counter and do a shirt." So I went behind the counter. Now this is 1990. So I go behind the counter, I do a shirt. I said, what do you want me to do? He said, "No, just do a shirt, anything you want." So at the time, like hip hop was big, but really what was popping in the city was like house music. So I did a shirt that said house music with polka dots, That was big because Kwame and the whole polka dot thing, you know. And then I did a peace sign, and before I could finish, some guy goes, "How much is that?" And he looked at me, the manager. I said $40. The guy bought it. He goes, "Yo, you're hired." True story,
Amazing.
you know. From there, you know, other guys, you know, a lot at that time I was painting a lot with Reese and Wen, so they got jobs. My boy Realm, KNS, and also
Yeah,
there was a guy named Bobber.
I remember visiting you guys back then, and I remember that time well. And what I like, again, this is a personal